Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Mitchell Millennial Podcast. I am your host, Mitchell, and in today's podcast, we are going to talk about the Huawei being banned from using Google. We're going to talk about Xiaomi announcing the Redmi Note 7S that was just announced in India today. We're also going to talk about whether or not Xiaomi fans have anything to be worried about in regards to Xiaomi's implications with Google. And finally, we're going to talk about a new pair of headphones from one of Xiaomi's subsidiaries, One More. As always, we couldn't have the podcast, we couldn't keep the YouTube channel going without your guys' continued and dedicated support through the use of my affiliate links, and I really appreciate all that. Also, I love my Telegram community. Shout out to all you guys. If you're not on there, you should go ahead and think about joining. First thing that we're going to start off with is talking about the new One More Stylish. Now, for those that don't know, One More is a Chinese audio company that had a lot of investment from Xiaomi, and we've seen quite a few Xiaomi headphones actually be kind of collaborations between Xiaomi and One More. One of those would be the Piston Pro HDs that I have with the dual drivers that sound great. So this One More branded pair of headphones, it's not coming out under the Xiaomi name. It's going to support Bluetooth 5.0. It's going to support the aptX HD audio codec along with the AAC audio codec. We're looking at 6 hours of battery life just on the single charge for the headphones. And you will get an extra 3 hours of battery with a 15-minute charge of the earbuds when they're totally dead. They're going to be able to pair them in multiple different ways, which I'm always interested to see when a company says that you can pair them different ways. If it's the QCY Xiaomi way, where you have to pair each headphone to the device individually and then take one out at a time, or if they have a more smart mono mode similar to that of the AirDots Pro. They have a titanium driver and all kinds of stuff. They look like a really kind of premium pair of true wireless headphones. Now, the thing that I'm going to have to kind of call out for them in regards to being overpriced is ultimately whether or not the sound quality that we're getting out of these can justify their price. Because at over $100, you're really kind of on the door of AirPods. You're kind of knocking on the door of Galaxy Buds, and they would have to, for most people, they would have to provide a significantly better audio experience and overall user experience to justify that price. Because most people, if they're buying in a premium pair of true wireless headphones, they're buying them as partly a status symbol, but partially as a way to go ahead and kind of show off, to be fair. So the experience on these is going to have to be phenomenal for them to be able to justify the price. And ultimately, I'm not sure if I'll be picking them up. I would love it if someone at One More reached out to me in regards to testing these. And if you guys want me to test them, let me know in the comment section down below. It would really go ahead and kind of give me a better idea of what you guys want. And if you guys are listening to this not on YouTube, go ahead and let me know on Telegram, because that's where I'm really active in my Telegram community. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Redmi Note, the Note 7S that just came out today for the Indian market. And it's really hard for me to keep up with all of the different variants that Xiaomi releases of the same phone, because they release one phone in the Chinese market and then they'll take some of the specs and then launch it in the Indian market, but that won't be a global release. And then they'll take a model that's already launched in the Chinese market and then call it something else when it gets to the Indian market in regards to the Redmi branding, the Note branding and stuff like that. But we're seeing this as kind of a more value-oriented play from Redmi as it's coming in at under 10,000 or under 11,000, I should say, Indian rupees. And they already have the Note 7 Pro, which utilizes the Sony IMX 586. I think I got that correct, which is like the true 48 megapixel camera. It's the same one that's found in the Mi 9 and the Black Shark 2. They're probably going to be using the Samsung GM1 sensor in the Note 7S. And it's kind of like that fake 48 megapixel camera that I've talked about before. I'm sorry, it's the GM1, but it's the Samsung GM1 sensor. It'll probably have that as its sensor for it. So it is a better than average smartphone sensor, but it's not that great, and it doesn't really shoot true 48 megapixel images because of the bare arrangement. So it's kind of difficult to explain, but that's the best I can do, is that because of the way the RGB, the way the red, green, blue filters are set up on it, you're not actually getting a real 48 megapixels resolution. And honestly, for the price, for all my Indian consumers out there, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a hard pass. If you're hard up for cash and you're in the budget segment, in my opinion, wait around for the Note 7 Pro and just continue to save your money. The Note 7 Pro is going to have a better camera. More likely than not, it's going to have a better camera, a newer SoC that's going to be more energy efficient as well as being more powerful. And it's going to age better as it is. The Snapdragon 660 is already a year and a half old in regards to a processor. And let me know if you think that Xiaomi is going to go ahead and do with the 660 the same thing that they did on the Snapdragon 625, which is basically just use it in a bunch of models and relabel it. If you think that Xiaomi is going to do that, let me know. Now, it's kind of the meat and potatoes of what you guys have been waiting for, which is talking about the Huawei situation. Does it affect Xiaomi? So, long story short, the U.S. has declared, the U.S. has put something into effect that is making it more difficult for American companies to do business with Chinese companies. The reason why, without getting too political into this, is that there's concerns over national security and the company of Huawei. Those concerns, a lot of those concerns, stem from the fact that in all or most large Chinese companies, there is a portion of the company that is operated kind of by the government, or that has things for the government's interests, right, within that company. So in many ways, Huawei is not necessarily acting on the behalf of the Chinese government, but there are forces within Huawei from the Chinese government. And with the trade war that President Trump has going on right now, there is a lot of tension right now between the US and China. Now, with the announcement today from Google basically saying that Huawei can't get access to updates on Android moving forward and isn't going to be able to utilize Google Apps. And to be honest with you guys, I think about this as more of like a weird, interesting way than a lot of other YouTubers, because I currently live in a communist country and I live really close to China, and I regularly buy phones for the Chinese market from Xiaomi. So there's a bunch of infrastructure that Huawei already has set up, because in China, Huawei, while they do have access to Android, they don't have access to any of Google's services. So in China, this is going to have absolutely no effect on Huawei users in China, because they don't, and they're not allowed to use Google over there. So the people of China, the consumers of China that want to use these Google applications and services, they're already familiar with the process of sideloading the APK so that they can gain access to Huawei services. They already have VPN set up already. So we're not going to be seeing a great deal change for the current Google users in China. Now, on the other hand, Google did also say that Huawei is not going to have access to future versions of Android. The part that I don't see necessarily being that big of a deal is that, as it is, Google, like it's open source, and Huawei already does so much to put a skin and kind of remove the Google aspect out of their devices from the factory, kind of, that as long as Huawei has access to the source code, and as long as they're able to access the source code, which they always will because it's open source, we're not going to be seeing that big of a difference. Now, it is worth noting that it's just simply going to take Huawei engineers and Huawei developers and kind of system builders a longer time to go from that completely stock Android kernel to building out a running operational version of Android ultimately. So for current Huawei users, you might not see an Android Q update for a really, really long period of time. Or Android Q, yeah. You might not see an update to your phone for a really, really long period of time, which if you just bought a Huawei P30 Pro or a Mate 20 Pro, I would feel pretty upset at the fact that now my brand new device is going to be getting really, really slow updates or slower updates. Is this going to be that big of a deal on the user side of things? I don't know. I can't say for sure. Now, moving forward, the ban that the US government did place on Google, or the fact that Google has to stop, there is something in there that says that American companies can continue to do business with Huawei under permission from the US government. So this wasn't a all-out ban of doing business with them, but Google would have to get permission from the US government to give the products and services that they provide Huawei prior to this to Huawei for app development and for phone development. And to be completely honest with you, the side of things that America is worried about is more on the infrastructure side, and we're going to talk about that when we start talking about Xiaomi's involvement in any of this. So I don't see why the U.S. government would not allow for Google to give these services to Huawei in the future, or get some type of exemption or exception for that. What we could potentially end up seeing is, in retaliation to this, Huawei does things to limit the sales of like the iPhone in China, which would be a really big hit for the kind of Apple brand, since right now they're focusing a lot of their attention on building their brand in China. So it's totally it's totally possible that we could see Apple putting pressure on the U.S. government if China fights back against the U.S. ban. And so kind of it's just going to go back and forth. Now, what is it that is being restricted? Well, a lot of the concern that we have on the US side of things stems from using Huawei parts in our telecom infrastructure. Things like cell towers and relays are all things that the US government feels Huawei could have a potential backdoor to, or potentially be compromising to get access to US information. So that doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with smartphone operating systems. And as it sits right now, I could see this going either way. I can't give you guys anything for sure, but now to talk about how this could affect Xiaomi. Well, this could affect Xiaomi in a few ways. First and foremost, Xiaomi's business model is very different from Huawei's. Xiaomi does not manufacture a lot of their own products. They create a crowdfunding platform, and then they become heavily invested in a lot of these startup companies, such as QCY, such as One More, Ninebot, XIAOMI, Yeelight. These are all companies that Xiaomi is invested in. So Xiaomi gains to profit from those companies doing well, but those companies, most or a lot of them at least, are independent entities outside of Xiaomi, depending upon like the level of involvement. So Xiaomi as a company doesn't really manufacture a lot themselves in most cases. Whereas Huawei, they manufacture a lot of components and a lot of things inside of telecom and infrastructure and inside of other products. So while Xiaomi puts their logo or they brand something that's made by someone else that they're invested in, Huawei kind of creates the components to go inside those products, right, that people buy. So there's kind of a fundamental difference in that. Now, because of the rising tensions and kind of the issues between Huawei and America, the next area that I see this being really, really good for Xiaomi is trying to do more to push online sales in the US. And the reason I specifically said online sales is that although a lot of cell phone sales are done in store and offline in the US, most people buying cell phones online at some level are going to be Android enthusiasts, are going to have done research, and that informed consumer is going to find value in the higher specs and in the better components that are available on a lot of Xiaomi devices. So I think that this is a great opportunity for Xiaomi to try to push more into the US market, since their biggest competition from China, being Huawei, isn't really on the map. Asus isn't that big of a name in the US, and ultimately I think that Xiaomi could do a lot to increase their brand recognition, and increase their foothold on the Western market. Will they do this? I don't necessarily think so. Although I think it's a great opportunity for them, I don't think that they will. Sorry guys, water break. It's been 35 degrees here in Vietnam. And do you guys like my bamboo straws? You can stack them so you make a long straw. And they're recyclable or sustainable or whatever you want to call them. So I think that Xiaomi could use this to push more into the US, to do things like home products for say, or smart products, where that's kind of an unsaturated market in the US. And I think that it's a great opportunity for them. Now, do I think that Xiaomi is going to suffer or have sanctions with Google in regards to this? I don't know. I don't think that directly Xiaomi and Google are going to have issues with Xiaomi continuing to use the Android kernel or have versions of Android. And the announcement today was specific to Huawei. So I think that this is pretty cut and dry thing in regards to is Xiaomi going to be involved? It doesn't seem that way. I don't think there's going to be much in the way of issues. There always could be. So for consumers, at least, we're going to go ahead and... So at this point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast, guys. I'm super tired today, and I'm going to go ahead and try and get to sleep a little earlier, do a little yoga. Till next time, it's been Mitchell coming to you from Hanoi. If you guys want to see more videos about Hanoi, you should go ahead and click over here. If you want to see videos about the Xiaomi Mi AirDots, go ahead and click this playlist over here. And until next time, it's been Mitchell coming to you guys from Hanoi for the podcast, signing out.